Hello, and welcome to the third grade science curriculum preview for the fourth 6 weeks. Today we're going to talk about Unit 4, Earth cycles and our solar system. You might want to have a couple of planning documents from Forethought ready, either opened up in a window, maybe behind this, so that you can pause the video and refer to those, or either print it out. We're going to talk about the pacing guide, the unit overview, and then look at the vocabulary on a clarifier. So let's take a look at the pacing guide first of all. We've got three little mini units within this fourth 6 weeks. The first one is going to be focusing on weather, and we've got 10 days and then ongoing beyond that. And that is partners with a couple of process skills. And then we have another 10-day mini unit that looks at the sun and really looking at some of the components of that. And then we have that partnered with a model using the sun, earth, and moon and looking at orbits and positions of those. And we have a couple of process skills with that. And then we have 7 days for our last content standard, which is identifying the planets in Earth's solar system in order. And then we have a few process skills with that as well. Just a word before we leave this screen about 3.8D, which is the solar system and their planet. We only have 7 days for this. This is the first time that they've really looked at the order of the planets. And unless you are integrating a research project, maybe in reading or writing in ELAR, the verb for this particular standard is just to identify the planets. So I know that I've seen a couple of campuses do some research projects on some of those planets, which is great if you're integrating that into ELAR. But to help keep you on pace with the scope and sequence and the pacing guide in science, I just want to make sure that I've pointed that out. Okay, so let's take a look at another resource that's going to be helpful for you as you plan, and that's the unit overview. And we've got three different components that I just want to mention, and that's the guiding questions, and then we've got approaches to classroom use, and then the resources for the different standards. So let's talk about the guiding questions for just a moment. You'll notice that I focused in on this particular part of the unit overview, and I'd just like to draw your attention to the statement at the top of that box. By the end of the unit, students should be able to answer these questions using unit vocabulary. So the unit vocabulary is the vocabulary that's on the standard clarifier. So you might have that up on a word wall, or your students might have that in a journal. I would encourage you to use these open-ended questions as formative assessment checks as you're going through those mini units, and then put one or two of them as an additional assessment question. Even if you're doing a multiple choice, maybe common formative assessment on campus, go ahead and use these questions and require your students to use those important vocabulary words to answer them. And if you're continuing to emphasize the use of those vocabulary terms when they speak, when they write, and then when they apply their knowledge to answer these questions, I think you'll see a big increase on their understanding and retention of the vocabulary. So I just wanted to point that piece out. So also another resource I just wanted to point out that I think will help really where to frame some of the content that we have for the 6 weeks is the approaches to classroom use. It might be easy to get bogged down into all kinds of components of weather, like what exactly are we supposed to look at when we talk about weather, and this addresses that a little bit, and we'll take a look at the vertical alignment in just a moment for that as well. Again, with the sun, I've got that broken down into the 3 key concepts to help you frame that for your students. So these are the big ideas that they should be walking away with, as well as looking at the models in the process skill as well as 3.8C. What does exactly mean to make a model involving the sun, earth, and moon, and what should your students be gleaning or getting from that experience and so forth. So again, whether you're new to teaching third grade science or you've been teaching it for a while, you can take a look and make sure that you are including all of the big things that you need to, or maybe you can find something that you haven't incorporated and that might help you. Okay, so let's take a look at some of the vertical alignment for some of the content that you're going to be teaching and make sure that we know where your students have been and where they're going. For 3.8a, so that's our weather standard, we've got for our students, they're going to be observing, measuring, recording, and comparing. So 4 verbs there, and they're going to be looking at day-to-day weather changes. The other layer that comes on top of that is different locations. So they need to be comparing weather on the same day in different locations. They need to observe it, measure it, record it, and compare it with that different location. And we need to include air temperature, wind direction, and precipitation. So that's a lot of detail in that particular standard. Last year, your students got some practice measuring, recording, and graphing weather information, including some of those things that they're going to be asked to do this year. So they should have some experience with finding wind conditions. That's what they looked at last year. You may have to bring in the direction piece on that, but precipitation they should be familiar with, and then air temperature as well. Next year, you're building the foundation for them next year, actually measuring and recording changes and then making some predictions using some weather maps. When we look at 3.8b, where your students are going to be describing and illustrating the sun, they're going to be really looking at that as a star, so they're going to be focusing that. You can see that they really have not had that before, except for talking about the water cycle, but never specifically the sun. So you're really introducing the sun as being a source of energy for the water cycle and providing heat and light. And that's a very important piece of foundational information that really links up into 4th and 5th grade. I haven't actually included all of the 5th grade standards that relate to the sun as a source of energy, which would be a little bit more of a peripheral alignment there, but 3.8b is pretty important as a foundational standard for 4th grade and beyond. Finally, I've bundled 3.8c and 3.8d. When we look at the sun, earth, and moon relationship and then the Earth's planets, you can see there's never been any introduction of that relationship or the planets in 2nd grade. So you are introducing this information brand new. There's no alignment for 4th grade. For the planets, although you know 3.8D is a supporting standard, so that is often tested on the 5th grade science star. And in 5th grade, they identify and compare the physical characteristics of the sun, earth, and moon. So that means your students are going to learn a lot about this year. Won't have anything with it for 4th grade, and then they'll come back to those 2 things in 5th grade. So again, just a note of importance for really creating a solid foundation. And then just to look ahead on 6th grade on how that relates to some of the things that you're going to be talking with your students about. So here's a couple of takeaways if you want to pause the video and you can kind of look, and these are kind of some implications that that alignment might have for your students, but I'll let you pause that and read that on your own. Okay, so just want to also point out that we've got some really great resources that are highlighted in the resources section of the unit overview. You know, you were asked to have your students make and use a model for the sun, earth, and moon. Well, we have those in the science lab. You're looking at the sun as a star. Well, you can use a sun spotter scope that's in the lab to look at some of the components of that really neat tool. We have a specific reader in Ames that focuses on exactly what the standard talks about in 3.8b. So I've tried to do a lot of legwork there for you, so I just wanted to make sure that you were using that to save you some time when you're planning. Okay, just a couple of words about the solar system in the order of the planets. I really encourage you to show and have your students create models that show different perspectives and different views of the sun, earth, and moon, but also of the planets. So if you take a look at these different images, you'll see some of them are kind of bird's eye views, some of them are sideways views, some of them are three-dimensional views, some of them compare different sizes. Be sure to check back with the standard so you know exactly what you should be focusing on. When we talk about the sun, earth, and moon relationship, we do talk about orbit and their position, so how they rotate, revolve, around, they revolve around each other. And when we're talking about the planets, we're talking about the order of those planets from the sun. And some misconceptions that we have with students is that often they'll see the moon always next to the earth when they have the order of the planets. Therefore, they might think that the moon is a planet. So just kind of watch for that. I can see that in a couple of these different models that the moon is right on in there with all the rest of the planets, and that might be a point of confusion. Something else that I'm still seeing in some resources, and I just want to make you aware, if you've got Pluto still as one of the planets, please be aware that you are not sharing that misinformation with your students. Pluto was actually listed or identified as a dwarf planet way back in 2006. And so your students weren't even I don't think they were alive whenever Pluto was a planet. So if that's a misconception that we're still presenting, I really encourage you to look at the resources that you're putting up, those old posters that you've had. Make sure that you don't have Pluto represented as a planet. Fine to talk about it, fine to talk about what makes a planet if you would like to talk about that as a nice to know. But again, when we're talking about the planets, there's 8 planets, not 9. Okay, one more resource I wanted to just show you was make sure you knew about our Delta readers. Here's a couple of screenshots of what those 2 titles that I have listed for this 6 weeks are. And I've got the list of the student readers, and they also come with these great skill builders that correlate with the readers. And this is what the boxes look like on your campus. And I just wanted to make you aware, those may be in the library, but the list is on the side. You can see there too. So if you see those listed in your unit overview, I wanted to make you aware of what those look like. Okay, let's kind of wrap up with vocabulary. Just a reminder that the vocabulary for each one of the content standards is found on the clarifier. And I always have the terms that come directly from the standard on there, and then I'll have any related terms. So when we talk about models of the sun, earth, and moon, I've also included revolve, ellipse, and satellite, as those are terms that aren't really listed in the standard but help students understand the content of the standard a little bit more clearly. So those would be words that I would definitely add. If you're only using STEM scopes picture vocabulary, please be aware that that's not a complete list of all of the academic vocabulary. Fine to use that as a resource, but you'll want to use the list that's on the clarifier to be sure that your students thoroughly understand the vocabulary they need to. So speaking of vocabulary, just wanted to put up a couple of examples of interactive word walls that might work for this unit. All of these images came from Dr. Julie Jackson's Facebook page, which is called Science Toolkit. And you can go onto Facebook and just search for Science Toolkit, and you can find these images also. If you've started in on interactive word walls, I'd love to see what you've come up with. So if you want to take a shot and share it with me, I'd love to be able to start our own bank of examples from here in the district. And if you've already started the interactive word wall and you want to take it to the next step, go back to Canvas for this 6 weeks, and I just linked Dr. Jackson's brand new article. It was just published this last December in Science and Children, and it focuses on how to use your interactive word wall with making claims and evidence. That will really bump up your student understanding and have them use evidence from the information in the word wall to make a claim and then back it up with evidence. So if you're interested in kind of taking your word wall to the next level, check out that article. Again, that's back in the Canvas page in the Just-in-Time Learning. And if you haven't quite started your word walls yet, I just want to remind you to go back to the 3rd 6 weeks where I have a 15-minute introductory on how to start an interactive word wall, and it takes you step by step on how to get started with that. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up with this last slide that just kind of looks at a couple of things that Jeff Samuelson had for some technology connection ideas. There is a great little weather website called kidsweatherreport.com. It's a really nice little site for getting basic weather information from various locations, which ties in nicely for our standards. There's also a great resource in Chatterpix. And then there is a wonderful video that really shows some people who created a scale model of the solar system in the Nevada desert. And I have the website right there, and I'll throw that link onto the Canvas page, that Vimeo link, so you can get to it with your students if you'd like to see that as well. Thank you so much for joining me, and as always, please let me know how I can support your science program at your school, and have a great rest of your day.